I'm Zarina Matcha and you are watching Non-Feminist Gal. Contrapoints is one of the largest left-wing channels on YouTube. She presents her views and arguments in an intelligent, balanced, and rather entertaining way, even though I disagree with many of her views. She has a rather old 19-minute video on YouTube where she discusses the problems she has with capitalism. Contrapoints has acquired her wealth thanks to capitalism, and instead of discussing how capitalism can be reformed, she calls for capitalism to be abolished and spends 19 minutes talking about the worst of neoliberal free market capitalism. She says nothing of welfare capitalism, social democracy, social reforms within capitalism, or any of the positive aspects of capitalism. She presents what I perceive as a rather one-dimensional view of an economic system which she herself has greatly benefited from and which has allowed her to make the very content which she is now funneling out to her million and counting subscribers. In this video, I'm going to discuss why I am not personally a fan of what I dub as champagne socialism and use Contrapoints' video as an example of this. So what exactly do I mean when I say champagne socialism? In the Communist Manifesto, Marx discusses bourgeoisie socialism, which is a form of socialism that is perpetuated by the bourgeoisie with the goal of helping the working class. I don't view this as a bad thing at all. There's nothing wrong with wealthy people wanting to support those of a lower class. In fact, that's rather a good thing. My only issue is when these people call themselves socialists despite having earned and acquired all their wealth thanks to the benefit of capitalism. In a socialist society, these wealthy folks would not be able to acquire such great amounts of wealth. This is because that wealth would have to be collectively shared by the community. Capitalism is preferred and liked by wealthy people because wealthy people have acquired their wealth thanks to capitalism. Likewise, socialism is preferred and liked by lower and working class people because they resent the wealthy for having more money than them and don't feel that it is fair. A capitalist society that includes social reforms like the NHS in the UK helps people of a working class to acquire wealth. This is why we have so many rags to riches tales of those who worked hard and acquired their wealth. Capitalism helps people out of poverty when it works in accordance with social reforms like welfare and universal healthcare. Let's say there's a child who is born into poverty who dreams of becoming a lawyer. In a capitalist society that has a social safety net, that child can work hard in a state-funded school, go on to university and get the financial support of student loans, get a good degree, and go and get a job in law. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that child has worked their way out of poverty with the help of the state. In a socialist society, everything is done for the collective good. The state is prioritized over the individual. In a socialist society, I wouldn't be able to pursue a writing career or make YouTube videos because the state decides what people's functions are going to be. A person's ability to profit from making videos on YouTube is made possible from living in a capitalist society. Thus, it comes as no surprise that several of the comments in Contrapoints' video, What's Wrong with Capitalism, that criticize her, come from those who live or grew up in socialist countries and wanted to leave. I do think that a lot of Westerners, particularly Brits and Americans who idealize socialism, forget that millions of people were killed under socialist regimes and fought their way out of these countries and into capitalist countries. This is why it's important to speak to Eastern Europeans or people who have actually lived in socialist countries and had family who grew up in socialist countries to see the effects that they had, as opposed to speaking to white upper middle class folk who have acquired their wealth and knowledge thanks to living under capitalism and then seek to undermine the very system which gave them what they have. Of course, capitalism is not a perfect system, and I don't think there's anything wrong with someone being a socialist. But to sit there and to thank the patrons who are providing you with capital due to your labour after you've made an entire video talking about why you believe capitalism must end simply makes no sense to me. This does seem to be very common among left-wing intellectuals who have become successful and acquired their wealth and live an affluent lifestyle thanks to capitalism, then sit and criticize the very thing that gave them this and say, capitalism bad. I can understand a Marxist who lives in a commune, grows their own food, and owns minimal clothing, but Contrapoints applies a lot of fine detail to her videos. She has a large following. Surely she must be making a hefty living from her videos. Moreover, the means of her production, her clothing, lights, camera, makeup, were all made by somebody else, unless she makes her own clothes or creates her own cosmetics, etc. Unless she directly shares her profits with those who helped to produce her clothes, books, lighting equipment, how can she, or people like Sally Rooney, call themselves socialists? I truly don't understand this, as to me it does sound like hypocrisy. If you are a socialist watching this, then perhaps some clarification would be good, as I really genuinely don't understand this. To me, it does seem like blatant hypocrisy. A socialist author like Sally Rooney is not involved in the production of her books, the printing costs, the ink, the cover binding, the book binding, the shipping. She profits thanks to other people's labour. A true socialist author would set up a company whereby all of the people involved in creating the book would get paid the same amount of money. The wealth would be evenly distributed and no one would make any more or any less money depending on how much harder they did or didn't work. As you know by my channel name, I actively criticise feminism on this channel. One of the reasons why is because I believe that feminism is full of hypocrisy, such as the case of telling women to be sexually liberated while simultaneously expressing disdain for women who are sexually objectified in the media. If my goal is to work hard and become wealthy, how on earth can I turn around and call myself a socialist? How can I speak so badly of capitalism when it is capitalism which gave me the platforms of YouTube and Kindle Direct Publishing to sell my books and to make videos? Isn't it strangely ironic how hundreds of people can profit online by making content talking about why capitalism is bad? Almost as funny as selling t-shirts with Che Guevara's face on them. I'm not suggesting that every single wealthy person cannot or should not care about social reforms and poverty. I definitely think it's wonderful when the wealthy help the less fortunate and support things like universal healthcare, state-funded schools, free school meals, and the like. J.K. Rowling is an excellent example of a billionaire who lost her billionaire status due to giving so much of her money to charity. But the thing I take issue with is when wealthy people completely shit all over capitalism and say that capitalism is evil and they are actually socialists. How can they be so hypocritical? If you hate capitalism so much, why not give up all of your wealth? Why be a hypocrite? If I were a working class socialist, I'd be pretty pissed off at all these so-called rich socialists who sell their produce for profit and still call themselves socialists. They are socialist in name, not in action. I certainly agree that neoliberal, laissez-faire capitalism is highly flawed, and that this is the dominant economic system in the USA, while in the UK it has been unfortunately more prominent due to over a decade of conservative governance. But I don't see why we need to go to the other extreme. Social capitalism sounds like a nice middle ground between socialism and capitalism. It takes the best of both systems and meshes them together to allow individuals to freely make money while also offering help to those who need it and providing state-funded services such as healthcare and education. But what do you think? Am I unfair in referring to Contrapoints, Sally Rooney, and folks like Russell Brand as champagne socialists? Do you identify as a socialist? And if so, what are your thoughts on champagne socialism? Let me know below. And please, if there is anything I got wrong in this video or needed clarification on, then I most certainly welcome comments and feedback. I don't consider myself a hypocrite, so if I got something wrong, I will be the first person to admit it. Thank you for watching.